All right, looks like we're live. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to another session of Looking for Work. I am filling in for Mike Roberts today, who's out of the office. If you see me, start throwing some questions in the comment box. Let me know what questions you have today for our Looking for Work session. Looking forward to chatting with you about what's going on in the job market today, any questions that you have about applying for specific things that I can help you with. To give you a little bit of background about myself, I have been writing code for about a decade now, well over a decade, and doing it professionally for a little bit less than that. But I started out at a code school back in the day, the Origin Code Academy. So I went through a boot camp program, started working at Miva, an e-commerce platform local here in San Diego. So got some time cutting my teeth on web development there in the e-commerce space. Started working more on the Python side, the data side, and kept on teaching, started teaching, from there at General Assembly and kept doing so in their data science program. So kind of been all over the place, a lot of different experience, but happy to try and take that and let you leverage it towards your job search. So see, we got some comments rolling in. Hi, Hannah. Nice to see you in chat. Hope you're doing well. Nice to see you. Hannah was with us over at the San Diego Code School when I started teaching there a little over a year ago now. So I've been working with the San Diego Code School team for a while, but Hannah was there in the early days. Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be covering. Always happy to talk about stuff like this. I think, I had an interesting experience going through the job search, and it's different for everyone, but any ways that I can take my experience and help translate that into some useful advice or to some answers for questions, I am always happy to do so. That being said, let me know what questions you have in chat. Happy to jump in and answer anything specific, anything broad. If you've got any questions about me and my background, happy to cover those as well. Hi, Smita, how's it going? Happy to see you as well. Hope everyone is doing well on this Tuesday afternoon. So to give you some general advice, I think I will likely be saying some things and mirroring what Mike has said before, giving you some same advice. But I definitely subscribe to the idea that passion projects and learning by doing is one of the greatest ways that you can showcase your skills and get yourself ready for a role at a company. So anytime that you can be getting your hands on a keyboard and coding, building something, even if you're following along with like a Medium article or a preset tutorial, you're getting those reps and those keystrokes that really help build that knowledge base and give you more of an understanding of the broader topics that you pick up along the way. One of the quotes that we used to repeat a lot when I was in my data science program was faith and reps. Those are the two things that it took to get better at anything. Was faith that your practice was going to pay off, and just trusting the system is kind of the quote there. And then repetition. That's ultimately what's going to get you where you want to go, is getting those reps in and just getting practice and letting the deeper concepts sink in as you get more of those reps. So like I said, I'll be mirroring what Mike's usually telling you in your sessions here, but happy to start answering some questions as well. So it looks like we have a question coming in. Can you point me in the direction of learning Linux, free or paid? So that's a great question. I'd say that's an area where I think some of the best learning that you'll be able to do is by doing. I think getting a machine that you can install Linux on, if you have a computer at home, getting another hard drive and getting yourself a Linux installation or just kind of going through that process is going to be super helpful. As far as guided tutorials and guided help goes, I would likely point you towards a Google search around the Linux Plus certification that CompTIA offers. I don't think you need to go get that certification. I'm not recommending that particularly, but I think that would be a good starting point for the broad Linux ecosystem. What are some of the general topics that you should be paying attention to? And I'm sure you'll find some existing tutorials and some education tools out there that will help you on that journey. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions there. If you have any specific Linux things that you're trying to do, any specific use cases that might change the advice. But in general, I think trying to look for some general courses or general information is a good place to start. And so starting with a broad certification that's recognized in the industry is as maybe a jumping off point would be what I recommend there. I personally have a hard drive where I have an Ubuntu installation. I've messed around with Kali Linux a little bit and some other flavors, installed it on a Raspberry Pi. And so I think that's why I recommend the learn by doing approach is I think those leaps and bounds came from me just sitting down and wrestling with an installation, wrestling with a machine in order to get things working. Great question, though. Definitely one of those fundamental skills, being able to work with Linux and just being comfortable in a terminal. Definitely going to pay off in the long run. Great question. If you have any others, feel free to throw them in the comments. Let me know what else I can be chatting about to help with your job search. Curious to know what you plan on doing there with Linux. So let me know. I'm curious to hear. Looks like we got another user saying hello. I can't see a username there, but I will say hello to our LinkedIn user joining us. So lately, some of the projects that I've been working on have been more on the hardware side. As I mentioned, working with Raspberry Pis and things like that. But definitely another area where I plan on learning by doing. I don't have a lot of experience with Arduinos or a lot of hardware type stuff, but getting my hands dirty is how I plan on tackling that. So. If you have any recommendations for projects that I should tackle, some fun things like the infinity mirrors or the common project, but stuff like that is always a good way to get your hands dirty and sharpen those skills. One thing that's been nice lately to see, I've definitely been seeing some job postings pop up in my network that haven't been quite as abundant as they have in the past. I know the past year has been rough as far as the job market goes, but it is encouraging to see some more posts pop up. So for those of you who are searching for work and have been doing so for a while, I would encourage you to stick in there and keep pushing forward. It's tough sometimes, but definitely seeing some promising things in terms of volume of posts that come through and the types of jobs that are becoming available. So if there are any questions that you have that I can help you with, please throw them in the comments. Awesome. We have another question coming in. What do you think about the cloud and containers? I think that's a great question. I think leveraging those tools are it's very important to being an efficient developer, especially these days. And there's so many problems that containerization and cloud-based development can help with. So I think sometimes it can be a bit overkill depending on what your project is and what you're trying to accomplish, but being aware of those pros and cons and in the situations where for instance, like Kubernetes or Docker are useful, you're definitely going to make yourself a lot more valuable as a developer if you have that kind of insight and that ability to find the right tool for the job. So I definitely think those are things that you should be aware of, and you should invest some time in learning, because they are very important, especially in today's ecosystem. Good question. How do I get started with a Raspberry Pi? I would recommend picking a project first. So finding some sort of tutorial or guide, starting with a project and going from there. I think hardware is an area where you can, kind of waste some money by, maybe buying some things that you aren't quite sure that you need. So find a project and as always, learn by doing. So find a guide, find a tutorial that you can walk through, and you'll pick up a lot. You'll be able to along the way realize some other ideas that you might want to chase down, or some improvements on the existing project that you can get started with. But I think those principles apply to building software as well. Just find a project, find a guide, and get started, and you'll find it along the way. Great questions there. Let me know if you have any follow-ups. Yeah, I think it's worth investigating, and as someone who has primarily been in software development, it's been a blind spot before, and so I think you make yourself more valuable and more versatile as a developer by at least being aware of the struggles that other members of a cross-functional team might encounter. So yeah, definitely an area where it's worth digging in and investing some time learning on. Absolutely. Keep the questions rolling in. I'm loving this. Please let me know what you have as far as questions go. If there's any advice that I can offer, job search related or otherwise. Happy to talk tech, talk about what's going on in the job market today. Got to give Mike some credit. I don't know how he does this as far as filling the open time. He's a champion for putting these sessions on. Yeah, this has been fun. I definitely appreciate getting to interact with the community like this, but yeah, filling this dead time. It's interesting. Keep those questions rolling in. Don't make me work hard. I like answering the questions, so keep those rolling in if there's anything that you'd like to chat about. For those of you still tuning in, if you aren't aware, there's a San Diego JavaScript meetup going on tonight. So make sure you head over to meetup.com, look up the San Diego JavaScript organization, find us on Slack. We'll be having our monthly meetup this evening. I think Jason Land will be leading that one. So we should have some speakers, some good discussion topics coming up. So if you are interested in anything related to JavaScript, definitely tune in to that one this evening. I believe that'll get started at about 7 p.m. I'm going to double check that information. Awesome. We have another question rolling in while I'm looking up that meetup information. What is your experience with working with a startup as a junior developer? So I personally, when I started out as a developer, I was working with a more established company. There were around 80 to 100 people at the company I was working at when I first started. So I can't speak specifically, from my experience, but I'd say in general, when you work with a startup, you can expect to get more varied experience in the sense that you are going to wear more hats and you're going to be, kind of covering more responsibilities than you might be at a larger company where that junior dev role is a little bit more carved out. And so I think that would be the major difference. What I'd caution you towards maybe investigating or digging into is the amount of mentorship or access to senior resources that you'd have as a junior developer. I think one of the most critical things that you can do as a junior dev is to make sure that you have mentorship and access to folks who have been around a little bit longer, so that you can be asking questions, getting feedback, and having conversations regularly. So making sure that if you're going into a startup environment, you'll have some support like that. And I know plenty of organizations that do a phenomenal job of supporting their junior resources, and whether that be a small group or a large organization. But yeah, like I said, something I'd recommend that you be aware of. But as far as the differences go, I think that you can get a lot of value from working at a startup. I think that responsibility sharing and wearing multiple hats definitely can accelerate your growth in a lot of areas that you might be isolated from in a larger organization. So you might see a little bit more client interaction. You might interact more with the sales team. You might do more of those auxiliary tasks that make you more well-rounded as a developer, but are a little bit out of that junior dev job description if you're going from a pure junior dev role. Yeah, so let's see. We've got some follow-up. Absolutely. Yeah, it's good that you're bringing that up in your interviews. I think those are good questions to be asking. So I think you get a good sense pretty quickly from talking to a company whether they've got that sort of support, just by asking about the day-to-day, reaching out to other developers at the company. If it's a startup that has other junior devs or other developers on the team, you can reach out to them independently and ask them. But all good stuff to be investigating for sure. Yeah, definitely a big believer in mentorship as a way to fast track growth and make sure that you're being efficient with your time and energy as you sharpen skills and make career moves. Awesome. Let me know if you have any follow-up on that. So we've got a question from Matthew here. What does the job market look like for junior devs right now? It's a good question. I think that folks are warming up more to the idea of bringing in junior talent and mentoring them up and training them. I think at the start of the pandemic, it was tough because everyone was moving remote. So I think hiring managers can be a bit more hesitant to bring on earlier career folks, just based on the fact that the workflow and the day to day is transitioning. So now that we're on the other side of that and people are more comfortable with the remote workflow, and there's even talks of eventually getting back into the workplace as the vaccine rolls out, I think that folks are coming back around to that talent cultivation mindset where you bring in your junior developers, you get them working with teams and learning under your senior resources. So yeah, I don't have any data. I can't speak to that, specifically on that level, but I would say, from what I see on LinkedIn and job platforms, that we're starting to warm back up again, and things are looking better from the junior dev hiring side. Good question there. I think it's important for junior devs to recognize that they are an investment. So I think having that self-awareness makes you even more attractive as a junior developer. So kind of understanding that relationship of you're coming in earlier on, and you might take some more time to warm up, but you can help out that company in the long run by growing with them and becoming a better developer. So yeah, having that mindset is good. And so sounds like you're on the right track, asking the right questions there. Let me know if you have any follow-ups to that one. It looks like we've got a follow-up to the Linux question. So wanted to start learning Linux, wanted to go into database admin and also explore security and network admin. With so many flavors of Linux, which one is a good start? That is a great question. So you'll find that all of those different applications that you've talked about may have specific tools or a flavor of Linux even that are dedicated to them. So Kali Linux being a specific flavor dedicated to security is a good example there. But as far as what to start with, I would recommend with a well-supported, well-maintained, accessible flavor like Ubuntu, because you're going to find a lot of guides, you're going to find drivers for your hardware. There's a good ecosystem around it. There's going to be a lot of support and a lot of resources. So that's where I'd recommend starting. Go with a general flavor, and then find what specific tools you need along the way. Start digging into those specific projects, and then boot up another installation once you feel the need to do so. That would be my recommendation. Good questions there. So back over to the job market. Do you feel mid and seniors are taking a lot of junior roles given the amount of displacement? I don't think so. I don't see senior developers or mid developers, necessarily going for those lower positions. And I think companies are mindful of what an overqualified candidate can do in a position in terms of, getting bored and not sticking around long term. So I think it's a bad idea from both sides, both for the developer to do that and for the company to hire someone who's overqualified for a role. I would attribute it more to a cautiousness by companies to hire folks that don't have as much experience. If they can get a senior developer, someone that they know who can deliver and be productive out of the gate, I think they see that as less of a risk, and it's a risk averse time for a lot of organizations. So hopefully that answers. Let me know if you have any follow-ups there. Definitely an interesting time, and I again want to say that I'm not going off of some specific data for those answers, just giving you my personal sentiment and what I see when I scroll LinkedIn and help other folks in the community in their job searches. But great questions. I think it's an interesting time, and yeah, if you can position yourself well as a junior developer, and like I said, keep that mindfulness and that self-awareness, you're going to help convince someone that they should invest in a junior dev, and yeah, the roles are out there. It's just making sure, like we talked earlier, that you have good support as a junior dev and you're positioning yourself well for the rest of your career. Great questions coming in. Please be sure to leave more in the comment section. If there's anything you feel like chatting about, let me know. I'll make another plug for the San Diego JavaScript meetup. It sounds like we got a few folks in the comment section here that would fit right in at our meetup. The monthly meetup covers a wide variety of topics, anything JavaScript. So it's not specific to any framework or any project. It'll be a very general meetup and a good way to network with folks, meet with folks, especially as a junior developer. It's a good way to get plugged in with senior developers at other companies, see who's out there and see what companies are maybe even potentially hiring. So definitely recommend that you check out the San Diego JavaScript meetup. Cool, we got a couple more questions coming in. What do you think the answer is to junior roles that list 1 to 2 years of experience? So when I see 1 to 2 years of experience on a job description, I immediately translate that to a big fat goose egg. That is 0 years of experience required. That is an entry-level role. I think job requirements like that are there to make you think twice about your skill set, but I wouldn't consider them a hard threshold that you have to clear. So if the job says junior developer, you can assume that if you have some projects in your portfolio and you've been coding for a while, even if that's not 1 to 2 years of professional experience, you still have a shot at that. Yeah, I hope that answers there. Let me know if you have any follow-ups. I would, for those types of roles, put much more emphasis on what projects you've built, what it is that you can showcase as far as your skills are, versus if you have that 1 year of experience on the resume. Great question there. So question, how would you describe a junior versus mid versus senior developer? This is an excellent question, one that's, I think if you ask 10 different people this question, you're going to get 11 different answers. So I'll do my best job to generalize the bins and give you the criteria that I kind of see or look for. But take this with a grain of salt. Like I said, I think you'll get some different answers if you ask different folks. So I think the easiest one to quantify is junior versus senior, and we'll talk about mid-level developers in a second. But when I look at the difference between a junior and a senior level developer, I think there's less to be spoken for on the technical side of things. I definitely think senior developers are going to have an elevated skill set when it comes to technical skills. They're going to have more experience with certain frameworks, as well as more broad experience across different technologies, frameworks, what have you. I think the biggest differences between a senior dev and a junior dev are going to be, I think, business sense or general project awareness, knowing where time is efficiently spent and where it's worth it to go with pre-built solutions versus building your own custom solution. There's a lot of those, I call them like spidey sense type situations where you need those reps to really build up that intuition as a senior developer. So I think the business sense and that general just project awareness and like we talked about earlier, being a well-rounded developer with kind of an awareness for your sales team and your support team and those types of things makes you a senior developer. Another area I think is just general debugging skills. And this is one that I've noticed from working with folks more than I'd say is like something that I look for when I'm talking to developers. But I find that senior developers have more of a hands-on approach to debugging. Oftentimes when I ask a junior developer, like, what's your plan for tackling this problem or what's your plan for solving this challenge? Oftentimes the starting point is a YouTube video, a Medium article, or something like that, which I think absolutely has their place in learning. But when a senior developer is stepping up to tackle a specific challenge, they're usually going to start with the documentation or building something with the technology that they're using. So I think that it's hard for me to describe it, but that willingness to just dive in and less of that keyboard apprehension in the debugging phase, as well as that general project sense is what I'd say separates the two. Now, circling back to mid-level developers, I think mid-level developer is an even harder thing to describe. I think it's almost like a unicorn. The mid-level developer is something that doesn't exist if you ask some people. So what I'd say on that front is a mid-level developer is likely someone in that maybe 6 month to 2 year window that is clearly not a junior developer because they've got experience, they've elevated their debugging skills, but maybe doesn't quite have the intuition or the decision making confidence that a senior developer would have. Probably butchering that one there, but again, it's hard to describe a mid-level developer. I think there's an easier line to draw between junior and senior. Now, great question there. What steps do you recommend to take to get from one level to the next? Besides building things, building projects in different technologies than what you've already kind of got practice with, I think getting mentorship and giving mentorship are some of the best ways that you can elevate yourself to the next level. So getting mentorship is obviously important. Getting guidance from folks who have gone down that path before, getting input from experienced people is going to help make sure that you're using your time and your energy efficiently. But as far as actually elevating your skill set, I think teaching others is one of the best things that you can do. So finding other junior developers that you can work with and eventually, be mentoring and teaching is going to give you confidence in your skills. It's going to strengthen your skill set, and it's going to give you that management experience and some of those harder to quantify, intuition pieces that I think just come with practice working with, teams and leading teams. Great question, though. Definitely hard. I wish there was a book that we could read that's, how to get from a junior developer to senior developer. But I think the biggest things you can do would be building more things and finding folks that you can mentor and teach. Great questions rolling in here. Let me know what else you have in the comment section. Let me make sure I get you the San Diego JavaScript meetup information. So again, the SDJS community is going to be having our monthly meetup, and that is today, 7 p.m. If you go to meetup.com/San Diego JS, you'll be able to find a link there. Definitely encourage you to come check it out. We'll give it another minute or two, see if any other follow-up questions come into the comments section. Otherwise, I will step away. Definitely appreciate all of you stopping by, hanging out, asking questions. Feel free to reach out on Slack. Like I said, if you join the San Diego JavaScript group, we've got a Slack community as well. You can find me there. Reach out on LinkedIn. Always available, always happy to chat. We'll give it a few more seconds here before we call it. Let me know if you have any last minute questions that you want me to answer before we pop off. One last shameless plug, San Diego JavaScript monthly meetup. Come check it out. We'll be having some speakers talking about various topics. You can learn about the framework-specific meetups that we have as well. If you like Vue, if you like React, whatever your JavaScript preferences are, we've got a community for you. So come check out the general monthly meetup, find out ways for you to network and get plugged in with other communities as well. Awesome. So we got a question coming in about algorithm practice and specific code challenge practice like Code Wars versus just building things. I would say they both have their place and you should balance them. If I had to throw out a rough ratio and make a guess, I would say that you should be spending maybe 80 to 90% of your time building things and then 10 to 20% of your time on challenges like Code Wars, HackerRank, things like that. Building things is where you get the leaps and bounds in skill set advancement, in my opinion. You're going to pick up big, large concepts. You're going to learn new technologies. That's where you're going to get big steps. Doing things like Code Wars and HackerRank, though, are going to arm you with the specific tools that you need to overcome some difficult specific challenges. So I think as you're building those projects, as you're kind of learning those broad things, you're going to run into those little bits of code that take you a while, those little problems that trip you up and take you a while to find a solution to. I think that's where the algorithm practice comes in. That's where the data structures practice comes in, where you have a little bit more at your disposal in terms of tools to tackle those specific little challenges. So good question there. I think there's a balance. Again, take that with a grain of salt. That's just a rough guess, but majority of your time, I think, should be spent building things, and then you supplement that time. You sharpen those specific skills with some HackerRank practice, some Code Wars challenges. Great question there. Yeah, I think to keep going down that route, I personally have found that in the beginning, when I was going through a boot camp, I spent a lot of time on those code challenges and definitely benefited from it, but I didn't have the context for why those specific pieces, those tricks, those tools were useful. I think it was you lose that context, you lose that that relevance. So I think having the projects with which to frame those challenges definitely adds a lot of value. Awesome. What are your thoughts on RHEL? I am not sure. I think that is something I haven't dealt with. Let me do a quick Google search. Oh, Red Hat. Okay. Yeah, I actually haven't done too much with Red Hat. I think on AWS, I've likely spun up an instance at some point, but personally haven't used it. So I would defer to someone else who has more experience on the Red Hat side as to the pros and cons over going with something like Ubuntu. But yeah, can't speak to that one. So that being said, if you find some good articles, some good resources, if you get an answer to that question, I would love to hear what it is. So be sure you share that, because I would love to know more about that as well. Great question there. Give it another minute or two, see if some more questions come in. Thanks again to everyone hanging out and participating. I appreciate the questions coming through. Definitely having a lot of fun chatting, talking tech. Let me know if there's anything else that I can answer. Any other questions that you have before we sign off for the day. Another question about skill balancing. So how important are the DevOps skills like hosting and familiarity with things like AWS as compared to just being better at JS basics and frameworks? That's a question that I think kind of depends on what your goals are and what you're hoping to do in the long term with your career. I think if you were saying that you knew you wanted to be a front-end developer, you wanted to be working on high performance, React Native mobile apps or in that space, it might be less important for you to get DevOps familiarity, and just might be more important for you to be able to host a project and call it at that. But if you said that full stack development or cybersecurity was a route that you wanted to go down, or if you wanted to be a CTO and you knew that that was a goal that you had in your career, was to become a CTO for a company, then I would say it's definitely worth it to go for that T-shaped knowledge set, as we call it, where you have more of the broad understanding across many things, and then you get the deep understanding in a specific area. So it depends is my answer there. I think all developers should have at least a baseline understanding of getting projects deployed, how virtual machines work on AWS, spinning up an EC2 instance, and things like that. So definitely important to know. But then from there, what are your career goals and how relevant are those skills to you in the long term? Kind of depends on what it is you want to accomplish. Yep, Moya says if you are full stack, you need DevOps skills. Absolutely agree. Needing to understand the full landscape, the full ecosystem that you're working in, super important. So definitely good stuff to learn. Worth diving in further if you know it will be relevant in the long term. Great questions. I think beyond just getting a project hosted and spinning up an EC2 instance, there's a lot that you can do. Setting up like a queue system, some sort of queuing pipeline, like SQS and AWS is another good project to know. Standing up databases and moving data around different cloud platforms is a good exercise. All right, we have a question. How do you start with full stack development? I think that's, again, when we talk about picking out a project and carving out a learning path, it's finding a project that has some data on a database, has some server, as well as some front end that needs to connect there. So that would be something where you just need to make sure you're looking for a project that fits that need. And then, if you're using a learning platform like Team Treehouse or something like that, you're looking for a program that teaches those skills. But I think it's common terminology. So if you go on your preferred learning platform and search for full stack versus front end or back end, you'll get some results. Great questions. We'll give it another minute or two, see if some more roll in. Let me know if there's anything that you would like to discuss in the comments. Appreciate everyone who has posted a comment so far. Have you had any experience in working on open source or volunteer projects? If so, how do you drive success? So yeah, I've worked a little bit, made a few open source contributions and worked on some volunteer projects in the past. I think those are times where process is going to be very important. Having a specific way for people to contribute to your code base, or a specific cadence that your volunteers are meeting, those are going to be critical to success on something like that. So I think those projects can be more difficult from a lot of different angles. When you're making stack decisions, you got to consider the skills of the people that are available to you. But from a general workflow perspective, I think just clear expectations and a clear process for contributing to those projects is what helps. So if you are looking for a project to contribute to, that's what I would look for, is a get started guide or some sort of community support around making your first contribution. Plenty of projects will have issues that are marked as good for first contribution. So there are project maintainers who are very aware of the the folks that are out there in the open source community, and making sure that contributing is accessible to folks. So if you're running a project, that's what I'd recommend, is making it easy for people. And if you're looking for a project, find the ones that make it easy to contribute. And that way you can focus on the skills that are important. Learning your technical skills. Great question. All right. I think that is going to be it for the questions. I think they're slowing down here. I'm not seeing any more roll in. So unless there are any questions that squeeze in at the last minute, I am going to go ahead and sign off here. Thanks again to everybody who tuned in, joined, and submitted a question. Definitely appreciated. Talkin' Tech. Be sure to show out to the San Diego JavaScript meetup tonight, SDJS. Meetup.com/San Diego JS is where you can find the information. Thanks again for tuning in. I think that's it for me. Last question here. Do you know of any good resources to gain access to the open source community? I do not off the top of my head. I would go to GitHub, find a popular project, maybe a library or a framework that you use. Even if you are going in and editing documentation and making contributions on fixing typos and readmes, great way to get started. So find a popular project. You could even run a Google search for easy to contribute open source projects, and I think that would be a great place to go. But GitHub is where it's at, so start there. And I think you'll find that it's harder to get started than it is to keep moving. So once you make that first contribution, the rest is downhill from there. Great question. All right, I think that's it for me. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I will talk to you all later.